Audio test for the meeting stream. Audio test 2 for the meeting stream.
Good morning, everybody. Apologies for starting a couple minutes late. Just looking at our committee coordinator, I think we're good to go. All right. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived here on this territory for a millennia. The culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We do have regrets from Councillor Wilson-Lowe today. He is participating in CUDA. But at this point, I'm going to ask our wonderful committee coordinator, Rosa, to do roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley,
Here.
Councillor Derouz,
Here.
Conseiller Desroches,
Présent.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Dudas,
I'm here.
Councillor Gower, Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Lowe, Councillor Luloff,
Bon matin.
Councillor Troster,
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
And Chair Tierney.
Present.
Chair we have quorum.
Thank you very much. Great. And before we commence today's meeting, we're celebrating a major milestone here at Transportation Committee. At this point, I'm going to go to the podium. Hopefully a microphone might follow me there, maybe. And we'd like to acknowledge Phil Landry's retirement today. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. First of all, I actually wanted to pass a motion. Phil's been here for over 32 and a half years. I wanted to pass the motion. He can't leave, but his lovely wife has said, no. Many of you know that Phil is now retiring. And on behalf of this committee, we're honored to send him off. Phil's been with the city, like I mentioned, for 32 and a half years. Last 10 as a director of traffic services. He's always helped us steer us around all the kinds of obstacles and issues that we face. His time at the wheel of numerous road safety measures were put into place. Cycling has grown in popularity. Our intersections have become more accessible and our traffic light signals are far more smarter. Among councillors and his fellow staff, people have described Phil as kind, calm, unfazed, and specifically cool as a cucumber. Over an impressive career, Phil has mastered the art of seeking solutions and moving things forward while standing his ground, which is why so many of the people that report to him have such tremendous respect. Phil listens more than he talks, and I have always appreciated that he takes everything to heart from even what elected officials have to say. I've also always been impressed by the lightning speed responses, and I want to thank his lovely wife for the nights where I might send him a text or two saying, oh my goodness, this is happening tomorrow at committee. What do I do? And I always get sage guidance from Phil, and that has been very helpful to myself and helpful to this committee. So thank you for that. Here's a quote from one of Phil's employees. What I think is amazing about Phil, he wasn't scared by doing the right thing. A lot of other managers don't focus on the horizon like he does. For example, that might have been the Traffic Services Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Action Plan, the first of its kind in public works. A steadfast EDI champion, Phil set a culture shift in motion with the goal to ensure that traffic services is a good workplace for everybody. Phil championed the innovation and his commitment to exploring new technologies like loop detectors, integration of traffic system controls, and connected vehicles that earn the city its reputation for being an industry leader. Phil has encouraged in-house to continue to build right out of Loretta, forgive me, and did literally that. They couldn't find shelves that would fit computers to need to run the traffic center. And if you haven't been to the traffic center, committee members, we have to take a tour. So what did they do instead? They went out and built a new casing and a new traffic center. The fact the employee engagement was truly important to him shows through his continuous participation with traffic services at the annual softball tournament. From what I hear, he's still very competitive, despite maybe hurting a little bit the next day. Krista Tanaka will take over from Phil on October 7th. Give a wave, Krista. And you certainly will have big shoes to fill, but Krista has also been in a great role watching and receiving mentoring from Phil over the many years. I just want to say congratulations, Krista, but more so, let's dispense with these notes here. I want to thank Phil. And before I turn the mic over for a couple of words, I would like to invite Anna Goche to come up and say a couple of words on behalf of the entire department.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to stand here for a few minutes because I know how Phil likes to be the center of the attention. So I also want to acknowledge that a lot of the members of the departmental leadership team are here and also from traffic services. So thank you everyone for being here this morning. I want to take away also some of the items that you mentioned and really speak to Phil as a leader. And when we found out that Phil was retiring, one thing that we asked him is basically what's been a memory that really had an impact on you in your career. And Phil, being the leader that he was, it wasn't about the technology. It wasn't about the engineering side. He went right to an initiative that he was involved in many years ago, working with staff across the department in different service areas around looking at opportunities for how do we continue to improve the service? How do we drive more efficiencies from the organization? And what he found was basically through that process is all the connections he made with the staff was really understanding how caring people are, how our workers are really passionate about the work that they do, how they care. And for him, it was basically from a leadership perspective, the light went on around. As a leader, his focus was basically, okay, how does he take care of his people? How does he get the most out of those caring individuals to provide the service to the community? So to me, that really exemplifies Phil. You mentioned his wife, Stephanie. A big thank you. Traffic services is not a 9-to-5 job. I can appreciate basically the evenings, the weekends, and probably the holidays that things were getting a little messed up, and Phil was always there. And for that, we were all grateful for it. I know speaking to a lot of the members of council, when they found out that Phil was retiring, I think there was a big chill in the organization. And one of the comments that I got on a number of occasions was basically, how are you going to replace Phil? The reality is we can't replace Phil. What we can do, though, is continue to build on the legacy and the foundation that he's built for the organization. That's how we're going to honor Phil moving forward. And it wasn't lost on Phil that he's been planning his retirement for a couple of years. So he's been planning also his succession for a few years. And we're very fortunate to have Krista step into the role. And she's going to be able to build on what Phil has provided. And I know that it provides a lot of comfort for Phil, knowing that basically as he leaves, that there's somebody that's going to be there to continue his legacy and really continue to take care of the people and take care of our community. So with that, I want to say a big thank you to Phil. He's been a friend. He's been a colleague. He's also been a mentor. Actually, I've learned a lot from Phil. I think we've all learned a lot from Phil. So for that, I want to say a big thank you. And Phil's not retired yet, so he's going to be at committee today to answer all of your questions. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, for those that are able to stand, let's give them a warm clap here and let's hear from Phil.
Thank you, everybody. As you probably all know, I don't like being the center of attention, so this is not the very comfortable zone for me, but I just want to thank Chair Tierney and members of council. You know, we work great together. We solve problems, and you know, I've worked over like 32 and some odd years, and I've never actually felt this like a job. It was just a love that I had, and I just want to help people, and especially in traffic where a lot of people have to deal with all the issues that we deal with. But anyway, I want to thank you for your support and that support in terms of allowing us to move forward with all the different programs that we've come up with, because without that, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did. I want to thank my service area leadership team. Thank you for coming today. It's very kind and surprised, and also the DLT team. Thanks for that. And I'm going to miss this place, but anyway, it's life, and we're going to do different things. And but I just thank you very much for the kind words.
Thank you very much, Phil. And maybe if we can do this real quick, if we can get all your team members and your lovely wife, Stephanie, to come up front. Alain, Vivi, we'll all get in for a quick group photo here, and then we'll continue on with the meeting. Thank you. That seems okay. Right out of here. Okay, great. So thank you for that. And thanks again, Phil. So we'll continue on with the actual meeting itself. First of all, there's no declarations of interest. Confirmation of minutes for Thursday, the 27th of June, 2024. Are those carried?
Good.
Thank you. Item number 4, we do have a presentation from the Public Service and Procurement Canada presentation about the South Block project. We do have 2 motions. We'll get to that in a minute. And we also have a presentation as well as 1 delegation. So we'll hold those items. Item number 5 is the Office of City Clerk. Just status update. I don't have to do anything on that. No presentations, no speakers on that. Is that item received? Thank you. We have no in-camera items. We do have a motion from Councillor Luloff. Maybe I'll get staff to put that on the screen, and maybe with the will of committee, I'm just looking around to allow Councillor Luloff to put this motion on the table. It's pretty innocuous. Thank you. Great. So we'll get that on the screen, and Councillor Luloff, if you could read that in, please.
Sure. Be resolved that the Transportation Committee approve the addition of the Adam Trim Road Community Safety Zone under the other business for consideration by the committee at today's meeting pursuant to subsection 89(3) of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2022-410, to allow for the prompt implementation of the Trim Road Community Safety Zone if approved by council.
And hold on, it's on the screen. You read it quicker than what actually it appeared on the screen. So there you go.
Just for you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm looking around. Did anyone want this held? And just to be very, very clear, this does not prioritize anything in way of queue jumping for automated speed enforcement. It's completely unrelated. Would that be correct, Phil?
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Okay. Are we good with that? Okay. Is that item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the beginning of the one item that remains on the table today. And before we get the presentation from, we have Rock Gamero, is Rock, oh, Rock, and we got Justin Nang from Public Services and Procurement Canada. We do have two motions. I've requested that we read them in advance, just so there's context. And then we continue on with the delegations. The presentation. We go to the delegations, and then we'll go questions to staff based on committee members and other members. So that will be the order. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask for Vice Chair Kitts to read the first motion.
Thank you, Chair. Get up on the screen. Whereas the federal government, through Public Services and Procurement Canada, is redeveloping the block bounded by Metcalfe Street, Wellington Street, O'Connor Street, and Sparks Street, known as the Future South Block. And whereas PSPC has indicated that they may require the reduction of Wellington Street to only one lane of vehicular traffic for several years to facilitate the construction of this project. And whereas traffic volumes in the downtown core are returning to pre-COVID levels, and Wellington is a crucial east-west traffic spine, even more so in light of the upcoming renewal of Albert and Slater streets. And whereas the traffic plan submitted to date would cause a pinch point on Wellington, therefore be it resolved, the Transportation Committee recommend that Council direct staff that any temporary construction encroachment permit issued related to the South Block project require that Wellington Street be open to at all times to one vehicular lane in each direction and one segregated cycling lane in each direction. And be it further resolved that if PSPC indicates that this is not possible, that staff bring forward a report to Transportation Committee prior to the issuance of any temporary construction encroachment permit for the vehicular or cycling lanes on Wellington Street. And be it further resolved that prior to any subterranean row license of occupation for Wellington Street be granted to PSPC, that staff report out on this matter to Transportation Committee and City Council. Thank you.
There we go. And it just appeared on screen. We're having some technical issues. Poor Rose is having a heart attack over here. So it is on the screen, and that will be, again, we'll discuss that when we get to that point. We do have a second motion, again, to set the context. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. Whereas the federal government, through Public Services and Procurement Canada, is redeveloping the block bounded by Metcalfe Street, Wellington Street, O'Connor Street, and Sparks Street, known as the Future South Block. And whereas construction is estimated to be completed in 2034 and will significantly disrupt the public realm on these streets, as well as impair annual signature tourism events and local economic activity in the neighborhood. And whereas the federal government has a responsibility to ensure that as a good neighbor, it must provide support to the impacted businesses and tourism sector throughout this decade of construction. And whereas City Council approved a public realm plan for Sparks Street in 2019, and formally asked PSPC to contribute financially towards its implementation with no response received. And whereas through its approval of the term of council city strategic plan, this council has approved a strategic priority of reimagining the downtown and established the priority objectives of increasing the public realm in strategic locations and increasing economic activity, safety, and tourism. And whereas through its approval of the City Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan, Council approved action item 2.2, quote, advanced downtown redevelopment projects, and specifically, quote, secure the funding required to advance significant downtown revitalization projects, including the Byron Market and Spark Street public realm plans. And whereas the City of Ottawa will collect modest revenues from the implementation of the project. Therefore, it be resolved that staff review the temporary construction encroachment permit revenue projections from the South Block project, and be it further resolved that the staff review the financial estimates for council's priority public realm projects in the affected area, and be it further resolved that staff consider these projections and estimates as part of the draft 2025 operating and capital budget development and report back as part of the draft 2025 operating and capital budget process. And this is a long one. Be it further resolved, the Transportation Committee recommend that City Council delegate the authority to the General Manager, Development and Building Services to negotiate and enter into a memorandum of understanding with PSPC such that they commit to the following before any temporary construction encroachment permits are issued by the City of Ottawa after February 21st, 2025 for the South Block project. A, funding for the federal portion of the Spark Street Public Realm Plan design. B, annual financial support to the Spark Street Business Improvement Area for tourism destination development and programming. C, more favorable customized leasing terms for the vacant Spark Street federal properties such that real progress can be made in finding short and long-term small business retail tenants for the street. Would you like me to speak to the motion now or after we go?
No,
through
we'll
this?
do that a little later on, if that's okay. And at this point, we'll go to the presentation. So now we have the context, we have the two motions in front of you, so you know where our heads are at. And hopefully we'll get a lot of questions answered based on your presentation. And certainly I'm sure there'll be questions from committee members after we have our one delegation, which is Kevin McHale, that will be having questions as well. So please, thank you very much for joining us here today. We truly appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, thank you for inviting us here to talk about the Block 2 redevelopment project. My name is Rock Amaro. I'm the Director General for the South Blocks program, and I brought with me Justin Sang, who's the Project Director for the Block 2 redevelopment project. The Block 2 redevelopment project is a critical component of our long-term vision and plan for the parliamentary precinct. It'll provide office space for the Senate and the House of Commons to allow for the rehabilitation of the East Block and Confederation buildings. When completed, it will include renovated retail space along the Spark Street Mall. It's been a long road to get to the point where we are today, ready to mobilize our construction site. I'm thankful to the city staff and to the Sparks Business Improvement Association for their advice, guidance, and partnership over the last several years. I acknowledge there is more work to be done. We very much appreciate that the rehabilitation of a full city block comes with impacts to city infrastructure, pedestrian movement, bicycle and car traffic, as well as the surrounding community. We'll continue to work in partnership with your staff to mitigate those impacts as best as we can. I'm going to now turn the floor over to my colleague, Justin Sang, who's going to walk us through a presentation and an overview of the project as we were requested to do today. Justin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're happy to be here and we're excited to talk about the Block 2 redevelopment project. We'll go to the next slide, please. So I'll open up by just providing a little bit of an overview of today's presentation. We'll start off by providing some background information regarding the parliamentary precinct, as well as the Block 2 redevelopment project. And then we'll also talk about the design competition that PSPC conducted for Block 2. We'll touch on the current project status, but really today's main focus of today's presentation will be the construction mobilization strategy, as well as the anticipated impacts to the city right-of-ways. Finally, we'll conclude today's presentation by speaking briefly about some of the coordination that we've been having with stakeholders, as well as our communication strategy. Next slide, please. So just to orient everyone within the parliamentary precinct, the image that's shown on the top of your screen shows Parliament Hill, as well as some of the most iconic buildings, the West Block, the East Block, and of course, Center Block. Directly south from Parliament Hill, on the south side of Wellington Street, is what we refer to as South Blocks, or Blocks 1, 2, and 3. And here today, we're really focused on talking about Block 2, which is the middle block within the south blocks, bound by the streets of Wellington, Metcalfe, Sparks, and O'Connor. Next slide, please. So the image that you have on your screen here is pretty busy. There's lots of arrows, lots of different colors, but really the main takeaway here is that the parliamentary precinct is guided by the long-term vision and plan, what we refer to as the LTVP. The LTVP is a multi-year program of works to restore and modernize Canada's parliament. The first phase of the LTVP was really focused on enabling the rehabilitation of the center block. Now that that is well underway, the focus of the LTVP is shifted to the rehabilitation of other key assets, and Block 2 is one of them. Next slide, please. So the image that you have on your screen here is an overhead view of the existing buildings within Block 2. The Block 2 redevelopment project is composed of two parts. The development of a cohesive complex on the east side of the block, which is shown in the light blue color, followed by the development of a cohesive complex on the west side of the block, shown in the light yellow color. These two complexes will create critical office space to support the ongoing work of Canada's Parliament. As a separate project, there will also be a national space for Indigenous peoples, including a dedicated Algonquin space, which is shown in the middle of the block and highlighted in gray. Next slide, please. The next couple slides, we'll talk to you about the Block 2 architectural design competition, which was largely seen as a success as it attracted some of the top international design firms. So this was a design competition that was conducted between 2021 and 2022. It was endorsed by the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, the RAIC, and the RAIC not only endorsed the competition, but they also appointed two professional advisors to oversee the entire proceedings from start to end. The competition had a highly qualified jury that was composed of distinguished professionals, architects, engineers, but also members of parliament, academia, and prominent members of civil society. The jury was also supported by a technical experts committee that also included members of city staff. The jury was responsible for reviewing all competition entries and ultimately recommending the winning scheme. The two photos that are on the top of the screen were taken during the jury deliberations. One other highlight of the design competition that I want to speak about was the process that the design competition followed, one that was open and transparent and engaged the public. As part of the final stages of the competition, each of the competitors had to make a finalist presentation to effectively pitch their scheme, and this was something that we streamed live over various social media platforms. In addition, at the conclusion of the competition, we also held a public exhibit on Spark Street, where all the material that was produced during the competition was on display and open to public for viewing. Next slide, please. The winner of the design competition was Zeidler Architecture out of Toronto, Ontario, as well in association with David Chipperfield Architects out of London, England. The next couple slides will show some concept renderings of the winning scheme. Next slide, please. As we go through the images, I'll just highlight some fun facts regarding the winning architectural team. First off, in 2010, David Chipperfield, the founder of David Chipperfield Architects, was knighted by the Queen for his service in architecture. Next slide. Again, in 2023, David Chipperfield won the Pritzker Prize, often referred to as the Nobel Prize for Architecture. All this to say that PSPC is teamed up with a highly qualified architectural team, and we are confident that the redevelopment of Block 2 will be a great addition to the city. Next slide, please. We'll now move on to the current project status, and really the main takeaway is that all of our major contracts have been awarded. We awarded our architectural and engineering contract in May of 2023 to Zeidler and Chipperfield. We've awarded our construction management contract in December of 2023 to Pomerleau. Design is progressing well, and now we are looking towards our next major milestone, which is to mobilize the Block 2 site to enable construction to start this fall. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides, what we will do is we will present our construction mobilization strategy. It's important to note that the mobilization strategy will evolve as construction activities progress. The first phase of construction will really focus on mobilizing the east side of the block. And some of the construction activities that we will undertake during this first phase include installing our construction hoarding, which will create the delineation between the construction site as well as the public realm. We will be relocating some of the existing infrastructure, which includes lampposts, benches, and utilities. And we will be performing some abatement and demolition on the interiors of our buildings. Next slide, please. So now we're getting into phase 1 of construction, which is scheduled to begin this October of 2024 and go until December 2024. Just to again orient you with the image that's on your screen, this is an overhead image of the Block 2. What is highlighted in teal is the construction site. The thin blue lines that surround the construction site represent the construction hoarding. Some of the impacts to the city of right-of-ways that can be expected during this phase of construction include the closure of portions of sidewalks on Wellington Street as well as Metcalfe Street, a portion or a segment of Spark Street, as well as a portion of the vehicular lanes on Metcalfe Street. There's no closures to Wellington Street or the bike lanes along Wellington Street anticipated during this phase of construction. Next slide, please. We now move to phase 2, which is anticipated to begin in January of 2025 and go until July of 2025. Just to help simplify and follow along the various phases of construction, the bullets that are on the right, what we've done is we've bolded and underlined the incremental changes from the previous construction phase. So just to walk you through what the change is between phase 1 and phase 2. So in this particular phase, in phase 2, the construction site is growing to the west. And because of that, the construction hoarding also needs to extend along the Wellington Street sidewalks to the west. Again, in this phase 2, there's no anticipated impacts to Wellington Street, the vehicular lanes on Wellington Street, nor the bike lanes on Wellington Street. Next slide, please. We now move to phase 3 of construction. So this is slated to begin in July of 2025 and go until February of 2027. In this particular phase, this is where the construction hoarding is now extending north out into Wellington Street. Again, the purpose of that is to accommodate the growing construction site. In this phase, portions of Wellington Street as well as the cycling lanes on Wellington Street are anticipated to be impacted. PSBC is working with a traffic consultant to study different options to relocate these bike lanes and to minimize the vehicular lane closure on Wellington Street. And this is something that we are doing in collaboration with city staff. Next slide, please. We now move into phase 4 of our construction mobilization strategy, slated to begin in February of 2027 and go until February of 2029. In this particular phase of construction, the construction hoarding is now extending west and encapsulating the O'Connor Street sidewalk. So obviously, this portion of the O'Connor Street sidewalk will be impacted. Next slide, please. The final phase of construction is phase 5, which is from February of 2029 to January of 2033. In this particular phase here, the construction hoarding is now reducing on the north side of the site, and the vehicular lanes on Wellington Street, as well as the cycling lanes on Wellington Street, are now able to return back to their original routing. Next slide, please. On this slide here, what you see are some preliminary renderings of the construction height. You can see from this particular graphic some of the potential locations for some of our tower cranes, as well as the construction hoarding that'll be surrounding the perimeter of the site. Next slide, please. One of the things that PSBC has developed is we have developed some decorative hoarding panel designs. And the purpose of these panels is to apply them to the construction hoarding that'll be surrounding the perimeter of the construction site. So the image that you see on the top of the screen is the design that would be applied to the hoarding along Wellington Street, as well as Metcalfe Street. And the design that's shown on the bottom of the screen would be applied along the construction hoarding on Spark Street. And really the difference between these two is the hoarding along Spark Street, as you can probably tell from the images, is a much more playful and interactive design intended to help to enhance the public realm along Spark Street. Next slide, please. So one of the studies that PSBC is actively undertaking and that I mentioned in one of my previous slides is, although the intrusive impacts to the city right away isn't for another year during phase 3 of our construction mobilization strategy, we have proactively engaged a traffic engineer, Dillon Consulting, to analyze the potential impacts to traffic and the recommended mitigation measures wherever applicable. This is a study that is being done in collaboration with city staff, and the results of this particular study we anticipate to be available by the end of this calendar year. And we're happy to share the results of this study with this committee. Next slide, please. So now moving on to our communication strategy. There's a couple different parts to our communication strategy. The first part is a notice of construction letter. This is a letter that we intend to issue to local residents as well as local businesses within the close vicinity of Block 2. And the purpose of this particular letter is to inform stakeholders of upcoming construction activities and potential impacts, such as closures to sidewalks and streets. The intent of this notice of construction letter is not to be a one and done solution. Rather, we intend to update this notice of construction letter periodically throughout construction. And we would reissue this notice of construction letter ahead of any major construction activities. Moving on, the second part of our strategy is to continuously keep our PSBC website and social media accounts updated with critical information and milestones related to this project. And the QR code that's up on the screen is actually a live link back to our PSBC website. Next, we are proposing to have a standing agenda item on the Spark Street Mall Authority board meetings to regularly provide updates and talk about the Block 2 redevelopment project. And this is a forum for which PSBC is already an active member. Finally, we plan to continue to collaborate and communicate directly with the various stakeholders that are involved in this project. Next slide, please. Building on that last point, this slide here shows some of the, or lists some of the stakeholders that we have already been engaging with and intend to continue to engage with throughout the life of this particular project. One point that we want to emphasize is PSBC will continue to engage the City of Ottawa, the Spark Street BIA and Mall Authority to seek opportunities to enhance the public realm throughout the duration of this construction. Next slide, please. And again, building on that previous point and enhancing the public realm, Public Works believes that we do have a strong record of collaborating with not only the City of Ottawa, but also, again, the Spark Street BIA and Mall Authority. And what's on screen here are a couple examples of some of the collaborative efforts that we have done in the past. And I'll just pick out a couple examples. First off, we have the Parliament Immersive Experience that's located along Spark Street. And this is an attraction that has seen over 35,000 visitors last year. Next, I want to highlight the collaboration that we've done with the City of Ottawa Arts Program, where we have showcased window exhibits, again, along Spark Streets. And finally, we've been an active contributor and an ongoing contributor to the City of Ottawa's Stores Open event. Next slide, please. This takes us to the end of our presentation. We're happy to take questions or comments.
Great, thank you very much. And since this is such a big project, at this point, we're going to, Jessica, I'll get you to put your hand down if I could. I mentioned we're going to go to delegations, and then we'll go to, at that point when the delegation, if you do have questions for the delegations, you certainly can ask. Then we'll go to questions of Transportation Committee members, other members of council, and we'll take it from there. So at this point, yes, and we're going to ask the proponent to remain at the table because this is their presentation. Thank you, Councillor Troster. So at this point, we'll get Kevin McHale. Kevin, if you wish to come up, you're no stranger to this place. You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I come before you today to speak in favor of this project, despite the difficulties that it will create along Spark Street for the next decade. The working relationship between the PSBC and our organizations has greatly improved since I started working for the BIA and Mall Authority over 11 years ago. In the past, PSBC projects would move ahead seemingly with minimal concern about the impact of Spark Street and the businesses located along the street. Today, PSBC project managers are regularly updating our team, providing opportunity to comment before some projects are even formally tendered to help minimize impacts. They work with us to negate disruptions that their projects may have on our activations, even pausing and removing equipment during major events like Winterlude when it is feasible. When complete, the South Block project will bring back to life several retail bays that have been vacant for many years waiting for this project to start, and it will revitalize an empty office complex. This will be a good thing for Spark Street and downtown Ottawa. While most of the construction and delivery activities will not take place on Spark Street, the hoarding along Sparks will have a negative impact on some of the programming activations we produce. We will have to rethink how we activate the block. What will festivals and programming look like? What opportunities can we create? What organizations can we work with? Will they be short interventions, or can we do something big? How can we continue to support our property owners and businesses in the area that will be affected? With the supports that are being proposed by Councillor Troster and staff, we have an opportunity to create positive experiences for residents and tourists, potentially on a scale we have not seen in downtown Ottawa before. It will be important that together, the city, PSPC, their contractors, the BIA, and Mall Authority work together to minimize the impact on Spark Street and downtown Ottawa as the transformation of this collection of buildings into South Block takes place. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your concise presentation. I really appreciate that. Councillor Troster has a question.
Thank you so much for being here, Kevin, and I'm really glad to hear about the positive relationship between the city and PSBC and the Sparks BIA. So I read in a motion that's got like a lot of technical pieces, and I just wanted to ask from your perspective. So this would require a MOU to be signed that would require the PSBC to fund the Spark Street Public Realm plan. I'm just wondering if you could give us a little history on that project and why you think it's necessary to be very specific in the language around the conditions for a building permit to include that piece.
Well, I think if you go back to the original public realm plan for Spark Street that was created, that was the first time in Ottawa, as far as we're aware, that more than one organization looked at Spark Street and thought, what should we do with this place? It was the first time the National Capital Commission, the City of Ottawa, the BIA, the Mall Authority, PSBC all came together to develop a plan. The next phase of that project really got stalled out by a number of conditions, federal elections, COVID, et cetera. And there wasn't a firm plan in place to get phase 2 started. So having a strong MOU that brings all the partners together, that outlines the roles that everyone's responsible for, whether it be funding, management, et cetera, will be really a key piece so that we can each hold ourselves accountable to make the project a reality. We don't want to see another downtown project just add to the stack that's in the corner collecting dust.
Thank you. I mean, I'm holding a letter here that Mayor Watson wrote in 2019 to Carla Qualtrough at the time, who was the Minister of PSPC, saying that in 2017, the NCC and PSPC put together a revitalization plan. And then this, Mayor Watson is saying, it's my hope that this funding can be allocated early in 2020 so that work can start amongst all teams. And here we are so many years later. So I want to thank you for your persistence. I agree with you that this is really important. I think there's a real misunderstanding among most people that Spark Street is like entirely federally owned and run, which it's not. It's a street that the city owns, where there is real estate owned by the federal government, but where ultimately the city is responsible for its maintenance, but it is a shared responsibility. And it's been a lot of years that we've been waiting for this public realm plan for phase 2. So I'm really hopeful that even though this will cause a tremendous amount of disruption, disruption, not destruction. It will cause a tremendous amount of disruption in the core. Like, this is choking up traffic for years. I'm very, very worried about it. I'm hoping that we can get something good about it, good out of it while this construction is going on, which is a major uplift to Spark Street, which we desperately need. So thank you for being such a great partner in this, Kevin. Is there anything else you wanted to say about any of the motions that were put forward today? I mean, the one that Councillor Kitts wrote in also insists on maintaining two bi-directional traffic for both bikes and vehicles on Wellington. And I just want to emphasize that the original plan that I saw had an entire direction of traffic closed off for years on end, which would be unacceptable. So I'm just wondering if you have anything more to say.
Well, to that point, I think that's an example of PSBC coming at us early on in a project process. And I would say that, you know, Rock presented to us years ago, even before this project got to the point of becoming an international design competition. So we've been very much at the very beginning of this project. Yeah, the flow of traffic is important. The reality is that Wellington is a major east-west connector through the downtown core space. I was here at this very group talking about that a little while ago. The maintaining the flow of traffic, maintaining it open, it's as important for the operations of our businesses to be able to get deliveries for service providers to come through, as it is for the general impression to the public that downtown Ottawa is open. It was very difficult to be on Google Maps or something and see Wellington closed, and it tells people who are coming here, especially people who aren't residents, that it makes the space very difficult to navigate. With lane reductions, it won't be as navigable, but it will be. People will still be able to get through. People will still be able to get through by bike, by car, by bus to the destination that they're hoping to get to. So maintaining that those lanes is going to be very important.
My last question is, there's also major city works going on at the same time, specifically on Slater and Albert. I'm just wondering if the revised plan, if you have any concerns with it, or you think it mitigates those challenges as well, because it's a lot happening in a very compressed part of the city, both city construction and now federal construction.
I don't have as intimate knowledge of the Slater Albert project. I will be going to the open house tonight. But I think the key to the whole thing is, again, it's going to be coordination and communication between everyone involved. And if a project here is causing an unintended consequence further down the road, we have to be able, or literally, we have to be able to make changes and tweaks to each of these plans so that we can make sure that everyone can navigate downtown as easily as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that you do, and the Spark Street BIA is a really exceptional partner with the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Plante.
Bonjour. Hi, Kevin. Nice to see you. I'm going to also echo what Councillor Troster just said about your BIA being an important partner in the city. I have 3 wonderful BIAs as well. Because this is just going to inform a question I'm going to pose later to the public servants, but can you mention all the stakeholders? You sort of said it in part of your speech who have been part of this. You said there was an engineering firm, the federal government, et cetera. I just want to make sure I have the exhaustive list before I get my question together.
Well, I couldn't comment to PSBC's full stakeholder list. I know that we've had a number of one-on-ones throughout the project with Rock and Justin and their contractors when it comes to the hoarding and such. So you'd have to talk to them about their exact list on that thing, but we've been primarily dealing with the people you're talking with today.
Great. Merci beaucoup.
Great. Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, thanks for your delegation today. Now we'll get on to just before questions, and you can start loading the board if you wish. Questions to our presentation staff today, but as chair, I'm going to just quickly ask a couple of quick questions out of the gate because they're all pressing on our minds, and it might help set the context for the following questions. First of all, in some of the discussions that I've seen, originally this project was costed at about $600 million. And now, what is the current cost evaluation since then? Yeah.
This is a very large and complex project.
Sorry, if I can get you to speak closer to the mic or pull it closer to you. Thank you.
So we're in a great place right now because now we have our construction manager and our designer on board. So one of the major challenges that we have is determining the condition of the existing buildings, mostly around structural. There's a lot of unknowns that we have, and we have a lot of investigation and studies to do. So now that we have our CM on board and we have our designer and we can advance the design to finalize requirements, I think we'll be in a better position to provide a final cost probably within the next year. But you are correct in saying that this is a sizable job in the hundreds of millions. Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly more than the 600,000, more closer to the billion mark is my understanding from initial discussions. Would that be fair?
I'm sorry, sir, 600 million, you said, closer to, you said more, I'm sorry, I thought I heard 600,000. My apologies. But it would be hard for me to say right now. I mean, we have some, the way funding works for us is it gets gated. So we have funding to do investigations right now and do preliminary works. We have to do excavation, we have to do abatement, demolition. There's a lot of work that we need to do in order to get the site ready. But it would be hard for me to provide an estimate right now. My apologies.
Okay. And I think you've seen a lot of the motions that we've worked together collectively on. I think there's a clear understanding that we must achieve 2 vehicle lanes, 1 in each direction, 2 cycling lanes, 1 in each direction. Otherwise, this will come back to this committee and council. We will not be issuing any permits. Is that very understood?
That's absolutely understood. And thank you. We're just looking at those motions now. So our next steps would be leaving this committee, reviewing the motions in detail, and then reaching out to your city staff and start talking about the art of the possible. And I thank you for the input that you've provided.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to get Rosa to pull up a quick slide on the screen. In some of our previous discussions, I'm just wondering, there was talks of the tunnels because this is a whole block, south block, and it requires the tunneling, and this is some of the discussions that have taken place. I didn't see any part of that in the presentation. So I just wanted to get some clarification. What's the cost of the tunneling, and are we also looking at, you know, what would it be used for? Is this for transporting cargo underground? Is this for politicians to get across to the other area? Just a little background on it would probably be important for us to know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first I'll explain the tunnel. So one of the largest challenges of this job is it's a city block. And the end product has to be this integrated kind of 2 complexes that are completely integrated. So when we started reviewing it, we realized we wanted the most efficient use of space in the building, and we didn't want multiple loading docks at individual buildings. So now that it becomes an integrated, complexes, if you will, with 1 loading dock, and we would reuse the existing loading dock that's on the west side of the block. It allows us not to have other loading docks. So in order to get goods through the building, we need to have the buildings interconnected. So that's why just in front on the north side of the block, under the Wellington sidewalk and street, we had proposed to have a corridor that would go across the building. Now this would be a multi-use corridor and it would only be 1 single level, but we need to run utilities through that. We need to run goods and services. And also we need to have a pedestrian path in order for people to go from what used to be building to building, but now within an integrated complex. Now, in terms of your second question, I believe, Mr. Chair, was the cost. Now, as I said, we're working on costing everything out right now.
Sure.
It's less of a separate tunnel the way you would think, and it's more integrated into the different complexes. So it would be hard to provide like an individual cost for just that because it's not tendered individually. It's not a separate works, it's integrated. But when we have the full cost of the project, I can assure you that it will be part of that.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, they always remind us we're 1 taxpayer. And so I think a lot of people have that on their minds, certainly. And of course, the original tunnel sets, it looked like just a couple. Is there plans to expand the tunnels? Like, is it multiple tunnels making those connections?
Yes, so for the Block 2 project, we'll have that corridor in front.
Yeah.
And then what we will do is we will work with the planning folks at the Public Services and Procurement Canada, and we'll arrange to have breakout panels on those corridors. And that will allow in the future for a parliamentary loop network to be implemented at the time when there's an appetite to do so.
Great, and thank you. And again, I really appreciate you being so forthcoming with a lot of these answers. It's coming fast. We're not used to seeing federal government projects moving this quickly. That being said, I'm just going to ask Rosa to pull up slide 17, because I think this is probably the most concerning slide. And if we can scroll down a bit so I could see, if we can just slide so I can see the bottom two pictures more clearly, that would be terrific. They're kind of cut off there. There we go. Okay, perfect. So we see the fencing. That's quite the wide berth. I don't know if this is a prison yard for politicians or what this is over here, but certainly it's quite the gated area around there that will create that pinch point. You can see from the Wellington Street side, but also on the other side as well, on the Metcalfe side. So in that one block, and I just remind people, it's a pinch point. Is it required, in your opinion, to have that much? Because you can see you can pretty much drive two cars. You're taking quite a few lanes of traffic. In your professional opinion, is that a requirement of this project? Because it's certainly a little different than some of our other projects, which might see especially on demolition, contain things on site. This seems to be much larger and a much longer scope of project. 9 years is quite a long time. So if I could ask for your feedback on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will turn it over to Justin for a second, but I will say ahead of time, I made the same observation myself. And to the members of the committee, I always caution with renderings for construction. Okay, so when I looked at it, does it have to be that bad? Could it be better? Or is it the worst case representation? You see cranes in that photo. I'll be transparent. There might be a third crane. We don't know yet. It's early days. This is our best thinking. But I'm going to turn it over to Justin to talk about the need to narrow traffic on Metcalfe and the other points that you made. Thank you.
Yeah, so just building on what Rock was saying, these renderings are diagrammatic in nature, and the exact amount of space that we need, whether it's on Metcalfe or Wellington, these are things that we're still actively reviewing with our construction manager, Pomelo, and as well as reviewing with city staff. So these images may not depict what actually comes in place. And I mean, really one of our guiding tenets throughout all of this is obviously trying to minimize the impact to city right-of-ways.
Wonderful. And just before I turn the floor over to my colleagues, one final question. Again, this is independent of any discussions, to make it clear, of anything to deal with the sale of Wellington Street, if that even happens. This is a completely independent project. Would that be the correct assessment? Because I know there's some politics at play. We sent an MOU. It's never been completed. We don't have an official offer of any sort. We've confirmed, but that's what is driving the two together. And I want to be able to separate the two. Is this a separate project from this entire discussion around the political side, which is the sale of the street?
Mr. Chair, that's an accurate assessment. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so we'll go to committee members. We got Councillor Bradley.
Thank you very much, Chair. You've asked a lot of my questions with respect to the project, so I think my questions are more for our city staff. My first question is just a point of clarification around the motion that Vice Chair Kitts brought forward. The second, therefore be it resolved, asks that if the proponent cannot keep Wellington open as outlined in the first, therefore be it resolved, staff are asked to bring a report back to TRC before issuing permits. So could staff outline what that report would look like and what decision points would be asked of committee at that time?
Chair, thank you, Councillor, for the question. This project will be permitted primarily through temporary construction encroachment permits that are permitted under the encroachment bylaw 2003. That delegation of authority is provided to staff to issue those permits. The effect of this motion would be, should traffic services and right-of-way staff not be able to determine an appropriate construction deployment with PSPC that doesn't keep 2 lanes open for peds and for cycling, that effectively my branch would return to this committee with a report seeking direction from committee and council on whether to issue that permit or not.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, typically we don't get into the weeds of approving temporary construction encroachment permits, and that's usually delegated to staff. So maybe this is for the proponent. If the committee decided to not issue the permit, what impact could that have on this project in terms of timelines, etc.?
Well, I mean, I would make a statement by saying, so there's a lot of different elements in the encroachment permit, and there's a lot of little details and different parts being approved or not approved. But it would be very detrimental to the project. We would have to do a complete rethink on how this could be delivered. This site is very congested. Like, we have no interest in wandering out to Wellington Street at all. What we have right now is our best thinking of what we would need in order to deliver this job. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that is. And we heard from our delegation, you know, the importance of maintaining access through Wellington. I'm just concerned that if we didn't issue this permit to have it, if it was needed to be temporarily closed for a period of time, that this could extend the work much longer than you already anticipated. And as the chair rightly mentioned, 9 years is a long time. And I don't want to see that 9 years turn into 15 years because we're trying to maintain traffic, which then could unduly harm the businesses in that area for much longer. So I just wanted to flag that, that giving, you know, the committee a yay or nay on a permit is odd, and that there could be some serious impacts to the project as a whole as a result of that. The chair touched on this right at the end, and I recognize that these are 2 separate projects with respect to the federal government purchasing Wellington or not. But I guess I would be remiss if I didn't ask, how is this work informing the conversations with the federal government around the purchasing of Wellington, or is it at all?
So Councillor, you're asking if this South Block project is part of the discussion on the other issue?
I mean, I guess I would think that if the feds had an interest in purchasing Wellington and there's a potential that council might not approve closing Wellington, that might put pressure on them to come to the table to purchase Wellington so that they have control over that street. So I'm wondering if that has been part of the conversation at all.
It has not been, because the talks are ongoing. So we're aware of this project. They are as well, and their desire to take ownership of Wellington. But as the chair says, they're 2 separate files for now.
Okay, thanks so much. That's it from me, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Judas.
Thank you. And actually, that was an excellent segue for me because, first of all, I wanted to say that I think that this will be a wonderful project. I'm always a huge fan of the federal government investing in, you know, not only their space and their precinct, but by default improving the city of Ottawa in the long run. And I understand the impacts the construction will have on our residents in the interim, but I am pleased to see it. And I think the renderings are beautiful. And I know, Chair, you had mentioned these are 2 separate projects, but in my mind, they're not. I do see that this would be the opportune time. And this is not a question to our staff. I'm putting this to the applicants, to the federal government. This would be the opportune time for you to offer the city a fair and reasonable rate to upload Wellington so that we could truly understand what the impacts of the changing dynamic of that street would mean for our traffic, that we could then invest money in whichever ways we could to address any traffic implications. So you mentioned in your presentation that the true weight of this project and the impact on our traffic flows will take place in 2025. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Does that give you enough runway? And once again, this is not to city staff. They're doing their due diligence. There's conversations I'm not privy to. But does that give the federal government enough time to ruminate on what would be a fair offer and to potentially include Wellington in this project? So we're looking at one kind of holistic approach to this street and the precinct?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I mean, I'll apologize ahead of time. I really am only in a position and knowledgeable with the Block 2 project. I'm not familiar with the overall negotiations going between the city and the federal government. That being said, what I can say is for the entire neighborhood, it would be wonderful for everyone to be working in a coordinated fashion. It would allow us to plan a lot better in what we're doing.
I fully agree with you on that. So I would love to see that we pursue that discourse because I think it makes sense for our residents as well, so that they know what it's going to look like. And then we don't go through 2 construction projects or 2 closures. You finish this part of it, you go to the next one. The other thing I wanted to ask, and once again, I know I'm pulling at all sorts of different projects, but this is all the same area. The city of Gatineau had previously come to our council, our committee, and proposed the idea in concept of a tramway that would have gone along Wellington. You know, originally we had pitched the idea of Sparks, we'd have that conversation. The NCC, the head of the NCC at the time had indicated he was in favor of this. Does this come into any kind of piece of this conversation, or is that just on the back burner?
Well, for us in the development of and the delivery of the Block 2 project, what we do is we watch the dynamics and what's happening around us, and we try to prepare for different eventualities. I'm not familiar with where the NCC stands on a number of this stuff, but I would be happy to take your comment back to the officials on my end and have them reach out to the NCC if that's helpful.
Well, I think it's just a matter of, I'm seeing that there's a number of different groups, Gatineau, Ottawa, the federal government, that all would like to do beautification and improvement projects on one street in one area. And my concern is, unless we do a once and done project, we're going to see as residents, as citizens of the city, a massive decades long impact on not just traffic, but just the public realm. So I would like for those conversations to continue. And I think that if we had a kind of fulsome project that incorporated whichever pieces are able to go forward, that would be beneficial. I also wanted to ask, and I fully understand that Spark Street does fall under municipal jurisdiction, although once again, the federal government does have ownership over the vast majority of the buildings. Can we expect to see any kind of flow over improvements to that street because of that project? I saw that you had the construction hoarding. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, will you be improving, the the paving stones, or like what will you be doing that we can see that we might be able to also piggyback on as we improve that space?
Yeah, so as you saw, it's a very long project. There's a lot of runway to collaborate with the city and with the Spark Street Business Association. I do think there's a good opportunity for us to improve some of the area directly around the building. Ideally, it would be good to have some kind of coordinated plan with all parties in place that we could contribute to. But again, the Block 2 project is largely about rehabilitating the buildings and taking care of the footprint immediately around those buildings.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, I would like that. I understand you have a certain phase of this project. I'd love for that scope to be broadened a little bit to incorporate all these pieces, because as I said, if we could get it once and done, less impact on our residents, and at the end of the day, the results will be better. And my question is to the chair, actually. Will we have an opportunity to speak to staff separate from this piece, just about traffic flows and implications, or is that part of this element of the question period?
Certainly, we have them at the table now, Councillor, if you wish to ask the question.
I just have one more question, then I'll pass it over to my amazing colleagues. We saw after the convoy and the closure of Wellington, how that impacted our traffic flows. However, we were still coming out of the pandemic. Now with the back to work requirements by the federal government, their employees are going back, many more businesses are active, and people are kind of milling around the downtown core. Do we know what this is going to mean to traffic flows? Can we anticipate what other actions the city will have to take to mitigate those impacts as this construction unfolds?
Through you, Chair. So we're pretty much back to pre-COVID volumes. And we're actually in the process right now of collecting more traffic data on Wellington Street. We collected some last December. and we're about 200 or 300 vehicles off of what we saw in 2018. So we're pretty close. So in terms of the impact, if the road was to be closed even in the one direction, that's where PSBC is committed and then hired Dylan to do that traffic analysis to determine what those impacts are. And then more importantly is what are the measures that you can do to try to mediate the ability to get through the roadway and both from a vehicle perspective, a pedestrian perspective, and a cycling perspective. So that work's ongoing, and the plan would be to come back to committee should they not be able to provide the lane in each direction to have a fulsome discussion on that traffic implication.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking, give me 1 second here. Councillor DeRoche.
Okay, I'm next. Okay, I didn't think I was, but
Same rules as your committee, Councillor. It's
good. You're good. You're a
first.
good chair. You're a good chair, as I always say. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, to the delegation for your presence today, and welcome to City Hall. You will get peppered with a lot of questions, and I know you're going to do your best to answer them. Again, welcome to City Hall. This is the kind of dialogue that needs to happen at this level between the federal government, which is often a one-way street. So if you walk away today with any kind of impressions, please walk away that certainly I express my appreciation that you're sitting here at the table and talking about a tremendously important project to the city of Ottawa, and that we're having this level of conversation. I wanted to ask you, I see you're doing your best effort to minimize the impact on the downtown, on what is an extremely complex project. Can you talk about how many workers would you anticipate would be part of this project that would be in the downtown core, contributing in some ways to mitigating kind of, again, the economic impact as we see with construction projects right across the city? As much as it's not large, the workers do contribute to economic activity. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that and whether you're doing anything to facilitate that, so that that workers buy their lunches or what have you in the areas that they work.
Thank you for that question. I've worked on a number of other projects in the neighborhood, and we find that there is a lot of business that comes in the restaurants at lunchtime and the bars, and especially after work. On the West Block, we had up to 1,000 people a day, 1,000 workers, and that was on the other side, up on the hill. Right in Spark Street, at the peak of this project, I think I could safely say we would have about 700 people on site a day contributing to the project, and they would be right in the heart of restaurants and businesses. I think there'll probably be a very positive economic impact of those businesses. So in one way, while we will be, having construction impacts, and it may not look as pretty as you're used to, those guys will be frequenting your bars and restaurants. That I'm quite positive of.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, thanks again for your presence today. Just shifting to our staff chair, can you just explain a bit better this encroachment permit and what? So when we issue a permit, we have a fee. I assume that's what we're talking about. And what's the intent of this fee? I guess one of my concerns is we're turning these fees now into kind of a grants and contribution program to do an offset. So what is this fee for the encroachment permit, and what's the scale of this? If you could just provide some detail there, thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. The encroachment permits rather are issued on a 90-day basis. So they are issued for 90 days and renewable every 90 days and have various terms and conditions in them. The encroachment fee is comprised of two components. The first part is about a $1,000 fee, which covers staff time for the administration and inspection of the encroachment. The remaining portion of the fee to be paid over the 90 days is a rental revenue. And that's to provide the city with an incentive to encourage that the work is done as quick as possible, quite frankly. It's not to cover staff costs. It's an occupancy of public space charge in effect. And that rate is established by council through the budget process and is charged on a square meter and by the day for each project.
And do we have any anticipated idea of the cost here that we would, or the revenue that would be collected in this context?
Councillor, we're still working through PSBC's final deployment for the first phase. But at this point, I believe the first phase, which is the initial 90 days, would be $120,000 for the 90 days.
Okay.
So this project is upwards to 9 to 10 years. So it will be modest in terms of its overall revenue in terms of our budget, but it will be likely in the range of a few $1 million over the decade.
For this project?
Yes.
Okay, and are you aware of any situations where we've done this? Do we charge? So I guess, would we charge ourselves? And like we have been very disruptive, I hate to say it, right across the city for construction projects on business. We don't charge, and we've said to businesses that it's short-term pain for long-term gain, and we don't have a lot of tools in the toolbox to help. So again, this is what I'm concerned about, just in terms of you know, the difference here and the difference where we're undertaking the LRT work, which is significant. So have we done this historically in any other context that you're aware of?
Chair, the bylaw was put into effect in 2003. It is a citywide bylaw, and we do administer the bylaw for all public and private projects citywide. The revenue allocation for temporary construction encroachments is approximately $6.5 million a year of revenue that comes to the city of Ottawa for this program.
And just again, are you aware of other circumstances where we've directed the revenue to specific projects as a result of disruption?
Chair, while it is an infrequent ask, there has been two similar decisions by council in the last year to redirect these revenues to other public realm projects that were before this committee.
Okay, those are all my questions at this point. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Troster, then Vice Chair Kitts, and then Councillor Plant.
Thank you so much, Chair. I have some questions for the project proponents. Oh yeah, no problem. So we all know that traffic is increasing downtown because of the return to work, the mandatory return to work. Here's my question. I posed this question to you in private previously, but I wanted to get it on the record. In situations when you know that traffic impacts will be particularly high, is there any communication with the federal government as an employer on whether they might be more flexible on those days or on those weeks in terms of requiring in-office work? Because I think we have a situation where a federal government project is going to cause a tremendous traffic impact. And then we have public servants who need to get to work who will be frustrated by additional traffic, when in fact it's being caused by their own employer and not by the city. So is there any opportunity to interface between the human resources decision to require in-office work 3 days a week and the impact of this project on those workers who will be trying to get to work downtown?
This is the first I've heard that approach. I apologize if I wasn't at previous briefing. I'm happy to take that back and bring it up to officials on our end. In terms of EHR policies and the return to work, our project doesn't have much say in that, but it's an interesting proposition. Yeah.
Know that this is above your pay grade or like a completely different department, but all I'm saying is that if we want to take an integrated approach to how this project is going to affect the city, I'm going to hear from a lot of really frustrated residents if they can't get where they need to go because of the impact of this project on traffic. And that is a decision that is directly impacted by the federal government mandate to return to work and this piece of construction, right? So I just want to make sure that the pieces are all working together, because we hear the frustration, but in this case, both are federal government decisions that are having an impact. And then also, I know this is not within the scope of your of this discussion, but I will also just put it out there that given that navigating a car will be very, very difficult in this part of downtown for a lot of years, and we really do want to encourage public sector workers to use transit or other means to get around. Another little knock to your federal masters to just say, we also do need assistance with our public transit system. I'll just leave it there. I know that's not what this meeting is about. But the thing is, this all interfaces together, right? Like this is going to have a huge impact on the ability to get around downtown. I just have a question for staff now. So the language that we came to in the motion that I presented in terms of dedication of the encroachment fees speaks to the affected area. I'm just wondering if someone could define affected area for me.
Chair, staff's understanding of the councillor's motion is the affected area is downtown Ottawa. And so through the budget process, staff within planning, development, and building services will work with our finance colleagues to determine how these revenues could be used towards public realm projects in the downtown area, in line with priorities that council has set for the downtown.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to address Councillor DeRoche's comments too, I mean, I have a motion in front of me that Councillor Gower presented on behalf of Councillor Leeper on March 28, 2024, which was dedication of encroachment fees near Somerset Square. And it was to dedicate those encroachment fees to the improvement of Somerset Square. So we have precedent here. The only thing I'll say is this one is just sort of unique because it's a bigger project. It will bring in more revenue, but it will also last potentially a decade. So this is why I thought it was incredibly important to ensure that we direct those encroachment fees in a way that will benefit the impacted community, because this is not going to be a light impact. This is going to be a very disruptive process. I do want to thank the federal government for working so closely with us and with the Sparks BIA, and also commend you for doing an architectural design competition. I do think that the end project will be beautiful, but getting there will be really hard. And that's why it's really important to ensure that we put that encroachment revenue towards public realm improvements that will dampen the blow for residents nearby and also make this a lot easier for people to navigate going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. Vice Chair Kitts, and forgive me, the volume button was covering my thing, so you're quite correct, Councillor Devine. And then we go to non-committee members, Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo my colleagues' comments. Thank you for being here today. It was also good to hear from Mr. McHale about some of the stakeholder engagement you've already conducted. I'm wondering, has there been an economic impact analysis done as part of this work?
I don't believe there has been. Let me confer with Justin for a minute. No, to date, there has been no economic analysis done on this job.
Is that something that will inform sort of the next state? I'm just wondering how you will be supporting businesses through the construction and whether the impact to business, I guess, is being considered.
Yeah, so the first is going to be to very closely work with the Mall Street Authority, the and Spark Street Business Association to be at their regular meetings as a standing item, because there's other jobs in the area too. We like to provide briefings on everything we're up to. And we'll hear directly from folks there. In terms of economic impact, actually, it will be interesting to know whether this will add an influx of economic activity with the 700 workers coming daily on site, or whether it'll be more of an impact for certain tenants more than others. But in the past, and this is outside my area, the real estate services on our end, we have provided rent rebates for businesses that were suffering. This is a little bit more of a complicated situation because there's other tenants that aren't our tenants. But that will be a priority to make sure that we're not negatively impacting anybody. And we're happy to work with the city or whoever that landlord is to see what the art of the possible is.
Okay, well, I think doing some sort of analysis, either pro or con, would be helpful as you move through that next stage. Regardless of the build out, this will obviously have a tremendous impact on the area. And so I'm wondering what consultation, if any, has been done with the Centertown community outside of the business community.
I would say to date, it's been limited. I mean, we've been very forthcoming with our information and putting it out there. Haven't received much comments, but we'd be happy to reach out to that group as well. When working with the city, we are happy to work with and talk to anybody. And to be honest with you, we could be better at this. You know what I mean? So if there is a group that you think will be impacted, I'm happy to work with your staff and we'll reach out to them and brief to them and better understand what their concerns are.
Okay, that's great. I'll leave that in the counselor's very capable hands to build out a consultation plan. But I think that is important. Certainly, I hadn't heard about the project until I was briefed for this meeting, but appreciating that I don't live in the affected area. I am going to ask a question to our staff. My motion does reference the upcoming renewal of Albert and Slater. So I was just wondering if you could give a little bit of detail about those projects and how that might impact the area.
Councillor, I'll start, and I believe my colleague, Ms. Duclos, the Director of Infrastructure Services, is on the line. This project is being coordinated through our Capital Construction Committee, which is an internal staff committee made up of staff from Mr. Laundrie's team, my team, Infrastructure Services team, Asset Management team. So certainly at that table, we look at how all projects click together, the traffic impacts, encroachment impacts, and from there we're able to put appropriate conditions in all projects, phase our capital projects, play around with signal time, quite frankly, and others. So as Ms. Duclos would likely indicate, all capital projects envisioned over the next 9-10 years are being embedded into the traffic modeling and coordinated as such.
Okay, but I'm to understand that these streets are up for renewal within the same time period that we're considering this project, and so that's where the concern is, correct?
You are correct. Oh, and I see Karina is on the line here.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor. There are a lot of work in the next years that we are coordinating. So I kind of have to repeat what Court says. We take all this into consideration. We plan based on all the information we have as much as possible, and we pivot if we need to. So for example, if there is a change on Wellington in the future, we will have to look at what we have and what are the impacts that will cause, just as an example.
No, I appreciate that. I think it's important to look at the area holistically. You know, obviously the proponent's going to focus on their impacted area, but we have a network that we have to consider. So I think that's an important consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Devine, and I'm sorry, Councillor Plant. Then we have Councillor Luloff, and then it'll be yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gamiro and Mr. Sang, for being here. I appreciate your willingness to engage. I appreciate that you mentioned that you're happy and looking forward to talking to everyone. At the same time, I'm gonna recognize and assume that you are not the official federal spokesperson either for the sale of Wellington or for the federal government's return to office policy. So I'm not going to put any pressure on you to answer that or any other questions that we would love to get answers for. At the same time, I think this debate here today certainly sheds light on at least my desire that whatever does happen with the negotiated sale or not sale of Wellington, it'd be nice to have closure on that, because I think what we are seeing here is the lack of closure is having a significant burden on our decision points on how to work in line with your project. One concern I guess I'm having is that we're getting a lot of new information, really quickly here, and having to make a decision on it that may have an impact on your project or on our city. The information in your presentation here today, it may have been available, I'm not sure. I'm just getting it now and understanding the impacts. the information in the motions that are being presented today is my first time hearing it. And it feels like there's a conflict of competing interests there, where we have a worthwhile objective, i.e. the historic development of our public realm, a development that would have positive impacts on Ottawa residents for generations and generations to come. That is in conflict with a legitimate concern on behalf of the city of the long-term, less long-term, but the impact that your project would have on traffic flow. So what I'd like to know is the impacts on your project that would come from the passing of this motion. So again, I'm only having seen your project description for the first time here today. I'm only seeing what comes in the motion the first time here today. In the first be it resolved clause of this motion, where any construction encroachment permit issued related to your project would require that Wellington Street be open at all times to one vehicular lane in each direction and one segregated cycling lane in each direction. If that is what is being discussed here, based on your current understanding of your construction project, based on where you anticipate your construction project may go, is that requirement that we are putting upon you, is that even possible?
I'm in the same position as you, where we are just getting the motion and digesting it now. However, I'm going to ask my colleague Justin to see if he can provide some initial thoughts on that motion as we continue to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it does pose some challenge. I mean, what we have shared previously with city staff is what we felt was, a good and reasonable plan, and it did show some impacts to closures on vehicular lanes. That said, the work isn't done. We are taking that back. We are trying to look to minimize that impact to both vehicular lanes as well as cycling lanes on Wellington Street. But, certainly we're not in a position here today to commit and to say whether it is feasible or not. It is something we're happy to assess.
In other words, based on your current plans, you don't know if we put a requirement that you must have one vehicle lane in each direction and one segregated cycling lane in each direction, you don't know at this moment if that is even possible.
That is correct. We don't know if that is possible.
In other words, by passing this motion, we may or may not be setting this project up for failure. Or if not failure, a significant constraint.
Excuse me, Councillor, just quick, do you have questions?
That is a question.
Okay. I think it's been asked and answered. They will be required to come back here. I think there's some extra context you provided there, but they will have to come back. That was stated very clearly at the beginning. If you don't support the motion in front of you, it's always your right to vote against it. But I think you're going on a different angle on this one than what's presented in front of us today. So do you have a further question for the delegations here today?
I guess I have a question more for staff on our part. Is there a timeline imperative for us to pass a motion of this nature? If this motion hypothetically were referred to a different timeline, does that have any bearing on the development of their plans? Does that have any bearing on our ability to respond to the development of their plans?
Chair, my understanding from speaking to my colleagues in PSBC is they wish to commence construction on this project, or the first phase that Justin and Mr. Sang spoke about in the coming weeks. Phase 1, phase 2, which really take the project out to July 2025, can proceed completely with permits issued by the City of Ottawa, because it does not involve the vehicular lanes or pedestrian cycling lanes rather on Wellington. I think staff would benefit from council's position on the bidirectional traffic lanes and pedestrian cycling lanes on Wellington in our discussions, to inform our discussions with PSBC over the next few months as we get ready for the permits that need to be issued in July 2025. So there is a significant amount of time before Wellington closures would be required. In the interim, PSPC can get the project going in the coming weeks with no hesitation.
Thank you. Then, Chair, just one last question to staff. So as the chair and vice chair just indicated to me, that, you know, if in the second be it resolved clause, if PSPC were to say that this is not possible, there'd be, staff would bring a report to committee. So I guess a question to staff, I'm to understand that if PSPC were to say what we are requiring is not possible, what would be in that report? That report would be, you would let us know what would be the pros and cons, the consequences of the issuance of such a permit?
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, I have trust that the PSPC team with their consultant will find a solution to address the motion, the requirement to have at least one lane per direction. Right now, we have 2 lanes per direction. So we're just asking, you know, try to mitigate the impact by giving us half of the space. Anything can be engineered, and I'm sure that they will have a good consultant team working to help us achieve that. So then you're asking something that hypothetically, if they come back and they say no, then we will be reporting back to committee with the impact on the traffic, because that's going to come up through their analysis, as well as the impact on their PSPC's work plan. So you'll have all that information before you in February. I think that's when we're going to come back, and then you can make a decision based on the facts that will be there.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. How are your 700 workers going to get to the job site? And do you have a plan not to further compound congestion in the area?
At this point, I don't have any knowledge on how those 700 people will get to the job site. I will say that will be at the peak of construction. For the first few years, it'll be a minimum amount of numbers, maybe might reach 150. It'll peak at 700 and it'll start declining. But I mean, I can later on into the project try to grasp on who gets the subcontracts, how they're lining their workers, and then figure out how they're planning to get to work. But at this point, we don't have that level of a detail of a plan.
I know this wasn't your decision, but the federal government really doesn't like to think about how people are going to get to work, do they, before they make decisions like this? I mean, we have to realize that these discussions come in a context that we're really ignoring here. You know, with return to work that's been mentioned, a possible tram that's been mentioned right adjacent to this site, the dispute that's ongoing between the federal government and our municipality regarding about $100 million in payments in year of taxes, the lack of support from the federal government and other orders of government on public transit that would help people get into downtown. I'd much prefer to have this conversation out of this silo so that we can solve these issues in a comprehensive manner rather than siloing and misfiring like we tend to do. We should be taking a 30,000-foot view of this project and, you know, and see the entire context of everything that's happening in our downtown core right now. And we should realize that these decisions are truly interconnected and that they have interconnected externalities that need to be addressed. I think that Ottawa residents deserve better than us playing make-believe that's not the case. So, I mean, this sounds like it's a needed project and it's wonderful, but there are so many other things that need to be considered within the context of this for us to say, okay, yeah, this is great. You know, I had a resident call me while we were in this meeting, his first time going downtown in quite some time, to go to a specialist appointment. And because today's one of the days that all federal workers are shoved in back to work, and we had an accident on the highway, he missed his appointment by an hour because he didn't even get off at his exit until an hour after his appointment was supposed to start. Our downtown, when it comes to traffic, is a mess, and it's great that we want to ensure that, you know, politicians and departments have a place to go into work across from that beautiful, you know, vista of Parliament Hill. But if we don't have a plan that's not going to further compound the issues that we're dealing with, I think that's something that needs to be looked at in a more holistic way. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Luloff. Finally, Councillor Pons.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Hi, I'm also going to piggyback on some of the questions that were asked by Councillors Dudas and Councillor Luloff. They both made great points. So obviously this will sort of affect traffic, as he mentioned, into surrounding areas. I was wondering if there were any discussions about the effect this will have on King Edward.
I know right now we are working out the details, collecting city data, choosing when we're going to sample the traffic flow as part of our Dillon study. We were happy to add any, we've let the city, will be choosing a number of intersections we want studied. If the city would like, we can add King Edward or any other street that you think is pertinent. We value and trust their judgment as the traffic experts for this jurisdiction.
So there was already a traffic study done on King Edward by the NCC last year, discussing obviously the truck traffic and the regular traffic. It's on the NCC website and I can send you the information if you want. But then, Councillor Luloff talked about, taking that holistic view. And I believe it was yourself that mentioned that there will be rent rebates for the tenants who, have to sort of use the word suffering through this construction. Has there ever been a discussion about providing those same kind of rent rebates to, for example, the truck route on King Edward, or if there's any effects on King Edward going forward from this? It's already pretty bad.
I'm not familiar with any discussion that's ever been had about rent rebates for people on King Edward.
Okay, and just to give you some perspective, and I know I talk about this a lot because I think it's very pertinent. I've been now to several heritage, transportation, and planning meetings around sort of federal government projects in the core. And these are great. These are going to, help public servants who are a lot more affluent than the people who live along King Edward. I have 2,000 Ottawa community housing doors. I have 2 historically Black churches on King Edward, 2 injection sites, and 600 shelter beds. So if someone could, maybe we could start having a conversation of unclogging some of the truck traffic in that area, because it seems like there's all these really nice, wonderful projects that are happening to very affluent people, and the poor people on the other side of downtown get completely forgotten about.
And Councillor, maybe that's a message they can carry back to their federal government partners.
I would appreciate that.
Just knowing that we're dealing with another item here, but certainly it is a valuable conversation. And I'm seeing some nods that certainly that's something that they can carry back to their federal counterparts on the Hill.
So could they, sorry, Chair, if you will just indulge me for a minute, could I have their email addresses so we could follow up on this in a couple weeks? Because it seems like I do get the runaround a lot on this file, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I get the ball passed back and forth between the province and King Ed and the Fed. So if we could,
we'll ensure the clerk provides that information to you after the meeting takes place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate it.
No problem. So I'm looking around. Before you leave, I just have a couple of quick minor follow-ups, and I do want to thank you for coming out here today. This is always a interesting discussion, and it's like a 3-ring circus or juggling. There's 3 balls in the air at once here. I did want to follow up on Councillor Luloff. The tram project, is everything pretty much in a silo? Like as we had mentioned, the Welling Street purchase discussion, obviously there has been no offers or interaction between us and the federal government at this point. There's still a MOU outstanding. You're not aware of any of that. The tram system, I'll just ask all at once just to make it easier. The tram system, $2.5 billion project, could have impacts on that. Do you guys talk to each other on that as well? Or is it pretty much in silos? I just want to understand that. So how we best approach this, if it's together as one package or completely separate. And I know it's a tough question. It's more political, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yes, as I said, we're here representing the Block 2 redevelopment projects. I'm not familiar with any developments on the tram or the Wellington Street purchase. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. And on that note, obviously, you know, we take fiscal responsibility very seriously in the city. Some other ministers might not think so, but we certainly do, and that's why we have these discussions. Just in a wrap up real quick, and I'm not looking for a response, more of just some of the frustrations we feel. And I have two hats. I have my hat here that I have to represent and deal with the work representing Transportation Committee and portfolios like this. But then there's also growing frustration across municipalities across the country, where we see, and specifically here in Ottawa, we're seeing a lot more of it. We hear about, you know, $1 billion for a south block. We hear about another minister talking about a $2 billion 6 bridge crossing, about tram projects, while municipalities and myself being on FCM are crying for money every day during these crises. So, you know, if there's a message to be carried back to the government, is municipalities are certainly hurting, and we're seeing the direct effect of not investing in municipalities. So hopefully, while we're investing in politicians and in protective grounds, certainly we can look at carrying that message back. We have to have money for the people in need within municipalities as well. So I did want to thank you for coming out here today and making this presentation. So we do have the two motions in front of us here today. I will be very much supporting Councillor Trosser. We worked very closely over the last, I would say 48 hours. We really have been connected at the hip, along with Court Curry, VV, as well as the mayor's office. So on Councillor Trosser's motion, is that item carried?
Carried.
And
Mr. Chair, can you just record my dissent on A and B? Thank you.
Sure, certainly that has been done. And when it comes to the motion that Vice Chair Kitts has moved on behalf of us in regards to ensuring automobile traffic and cycling traffic remain, failing that, they will have to come back here. And yes, we will have to determine the future of the project. Is this item carried? Great.
I would register my dissent on that, Chair.
Great. So noted. Councillor Bradley notes her dissent. Saying that, I'm going to go back to, I believe it's been the gremlins are in the computer system today, everybody. So please thank Rosa. We do have one thing we have to go back to, and I believe it has to go on screen, and Councillor Luloff in his beautiful sweater vest is going to quickly read through this because there was a problem technically on the screen, and we have to reread this and we have to carry this item again. So Councillor Luloff.
Yeah, whereas Trim Road between Waters Road and Portobello Road serves as a critical arterial road in Orleans, and whereas the segment of Trim Road is a vital active transportation corridor for students, given its proximity to local schools and community parks, and whereas recent years have seen an alarming increase in speeding and drag racing incidents along Trim Road, and whereas the Cardinal Creek Community Association has identified significant safety concerns for vulnerable road users, and whereas community safety zones are a tool to help reduce speed traveled along the roadway and to improve the safety of vulnerable road users in the area. And whereas the community has repeatedly expressed concerns regarding persistent and dangerous speeding issues along the stretch, and whereas the Ottawa Police Service has indicated their support for implementing measures to enhance safety and address the speeding problem on Trim. And whereas the community safety zones in Ottawa are established via delegated authority above the General Manager of Public Works and the Director of Traffic Services, we'll miss you, Phil, within locations that meet the council-approved criteria for the installation of automated speed enforcement, whereas the segment on Trim Road between Waters Road and Portobello Boulevard does not meet the council-approved criteria for ASE, and whereas based on the speed survey conducted in July 2024, the Trim Road, Portobello Boulevard, Spring Ridge Drive, and Spring Ridge Drive has an operating speed of 73 kilometers an hour and an average speed of 65 kilometers an hour. Therefore, be it resolved, the Transportation Committee recommend the council approve 1, designing community safety zone at Trim Road between Waters Road and Portobello Boulevard, and 2, installing corresponding signage as soon as practicable and prior to the end of 2024, if feasible. This is supported by the community and by the Ottawa Police. Let's give them the tools that they need to double fines in this area so that we can end the drag racing strip. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot, Ron Burgundy. Is that item carried?
Yeah, carried. I don't think Ron could have read it that fast.
I like the Ron Burgundy thing. Okay, so anyway, back to the meeting here. So that concludes the meeting. Adjournment. Next meeting will be October 24th, 2024. We are officially adjourned. Thank you very much, members of the committee.
Thanks, Chair. Great job.